Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Tupatehami and these are the headlines. Afghan officials say the Taliban have captured the country's main border crossing with Tajikistan after they encircled the provincial capital of Kunduz. This comes after the Pentagon said it could slow down the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan in light of recent battlefield victories by the Taliban. According to the UN Special Envoy, the Taliban have gained control of more than 50 districts over the last month. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Islamabad is ready to partner with Washington for peace in Afghanistan. In an article in the Washington Post, Khan said, however, the country will not host US bases after troops withdrawal. The Prime Minister also opposed the military takeover of Afghanistan, saying it will only lead to a civil war. Pakistan has challenged India to hold an opinion poll on the aspirations of Kashmiris over occupied Kashmir's illegal annexation. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said New Delhi will have to reverse its illegal revocation of the valley's statehood if Kashmiris around the world reject these unilateral steps. In Spain, the government has approved pardons for 9 Catalan separatist leaders jailed for their role in a failed independence bid in the region in 2017. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has described the pardons as the first step towards resolving a bitter political conflict. But the opposition says it will challenge the pardons in the courts. India has reported nearly 1,200 deaths from COVID-19 and over 42,000 cases overnight, the lowest in 3 months. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 27 more people lost their lives to the virus, while over 600 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected nearly 179 million people so far. And in cricket, Islamabad United are batting against Peshawar Zalmi in the second eliminator of the Pakistan Super League in Abu Dhabi. The winner of the match will face Multan Sultans in the final on Thursday. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Afghan officials say the Taliban have captured the border crossing with Tajikistan after they encircled the provincial capital of Kunduz. This comes after the Pentagon said it could slow down the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan in light of recent battlefield victories by the Taliban. According to the UN Special Envoy, the Taliban have gained control of more than 50 districts over the last month. The group has also reportedly seized large quantities of military equipment and killed, wounded or captured dozens of troops. The Afghan government has denied that the districts have fallen to the Taliban, saying they were evacuated in a tactical withdrawal. It is unclear how many Taliban have been killed or wounded. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Islamabad is ready to partner with Washington for peace in Afghanistan. In an article in the Washington Post, Khan said, however, the country will not host US bases after the troops' withdrawal.
The Prime Minister opposed the military takeover of Afghanistan, saying it will only lead to a civil war. He said the Taliban cannot win over the whole country and yet must be included in any government for it to succeed. He added Pakistan has no favorites and will work with any government that enjoys the confidence of the Afghan people. Khan noted both Pakistan and the US want negotiated peace in Afghanistan and any further military action is futile. He said promoting economic connectivity and regional trade is the key to lasting peace and security in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister said Pakistan has suffered so much from the wars in Afghanistan as more than 70,000 Pakistanis were martyred.
Pakistan has challenged India to hold an opinion poll on the aspirations of Kashmiris over occupied Kashmir's illegal annexation. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said New Delhi will have to restore the valley's autonomy if Kashmiris around the world reject these steps. He said all Kashmiris, including those who had been sharing power with Indian government in the past, are united against these illegal steps. The Foreign Minister added India's announcement to convene a conference on Thursday indicates that all is not well. Moving on, in Spain, the government has approved pardons for 9 Catalan separatist leaders jailed for their role in a failed independence bid in the region in 2017. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced the pardons in a televised address. They are conditional and a ban on the leaders holding public office remains in place. Sánchez has described the pardons as a first step towards resolving a bitter political conflict, but the opposition says it will challenge the pardons in the courts. A majority of Spaniards also oppose the decision. Iran has rejected U.S. statement that Tehran's presidential electoral process was manufactured. Government spokesperson Ali Rebai said that Tehran considers Washington's remarks as an interference in its domestic affairs. Iran state media quoted Rebai saying that Washington's statement is against the international law. He said the U.S. does not have the authority to express its views on the process of elections in Iran or any other country. Earlier, State Department spokesperson said the U.S. viewed Iran's electoral process as neither free nor fair. At least 20 Palestinians have been injured after Israeli forces attacked the anti-settlement protesters in occupied East Jerusalem. The Red Crescent said 16 people were hit by tear gas shells and pepper spray, while others wounded by rubber-coated bullets. The service said the Jewish settlers also hurled stones and chairs at the protesters and at one of its ambulances. It added Israeli forces sprayed skunk water on another ambulance belonging to the service. Meanwhile, Israeli forces detained at least 25 Palestinians in multiple overnight raids across the occupied West Bank. Myanmar's military says it has killed 4 terrorists in a gunfight with the anti-junta militia in the country's second biggest city of Mandalay. In a statement, the junta's information team says security forces acted on a tip-off and raided a house in Chanmia Tharsi township. It says some soldiers were seriously injured in the ensuing battle, while forces arrested 8 terrorists for possessing arms. Confirming the fight, the People's Defense Force said its members responded after the army raided one of its bases. Hundreds of anti-coup protesters have reportedly tracked into the insurgent-held areas to receive military training. Myanmar has seen violence and chaos ever since the military staged a coup on February the 1st. At least 873 civilians have been killed in the military's crackdowns on ongoing protests across the country. Britain and the EU have slapped fresh sanctions on Myanmar officials and state-owned companies over the February 1st coup.
The European Union imposed an asset freeze and a travel ban on 8 officials of the military government and sanctioned 3 state-owned companies, whereas Britain has added 3 Myanmar entities to its sanctions list to target the regime's economic interest. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said the United Kingdom will continue to hold the junta to account for subversion of democracy and brutal killings of civilians. However, Russia has committed to further strengthening its security and other ties with the military government in Myanmar. Myanmar's junta leader Min Aung Hlaing is in Moscow to attend a security conference this week. Meanwhile, Myanmar's security forces have clashed with a newly formed militia group in the country's second biggest city of Mandalay. According to an activist group, Myanmar's military has killed at least 873 civilians in crackdowns on ongoing protests across the country.
At the UN Human Rights Council, Belarus has delivered a joint speech on behalf of 65 countries calling for non-interference in China's internal affairs under the pretext of human rights. The statement emphasized the respect for the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of all countries are basic norms governing international relations. Belarus's envoy to the UN also voiced support for implementing one country, two systems in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region.
We oppose politicization of human rights and double standards. We also oppose unfounded allegations against China out of political motivation and based on disinformation, and interference in China's internal affairs under the pretext of human rights.
North Korea has dismissed the prospects for an early resumption of diplomacy with the United States. North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, said expectations on talks will only bring greater disappointment to the U.S. In a statement, she said the U.S. appears to be interpreting signals from North Korea in a way to seek comfort for itself. She was responding to U.S. National Security Advisor's statement that he saw an interesting signal from Pyongyang. Earlier, Kim Jong-un said Pyongyang must prepare for both dialogue and confrontation with Washington. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, met South Korea's Unification Minister Lee In-young in Seoul. During the meeting, the two sides agreed to pursue complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula through talks. The U.S. says it is in talks with key stakeholders in Libya over the withdrawal of foreign fighters ahead of elections in December. The development comes as Secretary of State Antony Blinken travels to the second Berlin conference on Libya this week. Talking to reporters, U.S. Special Envoy for Libya, Richard Norland, underscored the importance of the elections. He said a fully empowered and legitimate government could push foreign actors to pull out their troops. Norland added the pullout will be a very important and impactful development for the country. He called on all the sides to work towards making progress instead of waiting for next year. Libya's two main warring sides consented to a new government this year after a decade of violence. India has reported nearly 1,200 deaths from COVID-19 and over 42,000 cases overnight, the lowest in 3 months. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected nearly 179 million people so far.
The World Health Organization has warned of a growing shortage of COVID-19 vaccines in a majority of poorer countries, despite the global sharing scheme. Health Body Senior Advisor Dr. Bruce Alward said the COVAX program had delivered 90 million doses to 131 countries. But he said this was nowhere near enough to protect populations from a virus still spreading worldwide. Cases are surging again in Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, raising prospects of more tough restrictions in Sydney. Meanwhile, Cuba says its 3-shot Abdala COVID-19 vaccine has proven over 92% effective in last-stage clinical trials. Brussels' COVID-19 woes continue as the country confirmed 761 deaths and nearly 39,000 new cases over the past 24 hours. However, the once worst-hit European country, Italy, has decided to end mandatory mask wearing from June 28.
Pakistan has reported 27 new deaths from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the country's death toll has reached 22,034. It reported 663 infections overnight, with this year's lowest positivity rate of 1.69%. The ministry says the caseload is approaching 950,000, while over 894,000 people have recovered. The number of active cases is just above 33,000. Meanwhile, the government says it will receive 13 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine by the end of this year. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Ethiopia, voters are heading to polls in the Sidama region to cast ballots in the country's national and regional parliamentary polls. Authorities failed to hold polls in 4 of Ethiopia's 10 regions, including Sidama, due to logistical problems. More than 37 million people were registered to vote to pick 547 deputies for the federal parliament. Meanwhile, officials began counting ballots from other regions amid reports of irregularities in some areas. The ruling Prosperity Coalition, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is the main contender for the victory among 46 parties. Somalian army says it has killed a number of Al-Shabaab militants in planned simultaneous operations in various parts of the country. In a tweet, the military said its commandos raided the militant hideouts in Sabun, Baru Medina Ade and the Middle Shabelle areas. The operations were launched a week after the Al-Shabaab militants attacked an army base in the Middle Shabelle region with a car bomb. However, no casualties were reported. The United Nations says more than 8,500 children have been used as soldiers globally in 2020. A report to the Security Council reveals that around 2,700 others died in various conflicts. The report verifies violations against 19,379 children in 21 conflicts. These were committed in Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan, Syria and Yemen. The report also blacklists Myanmar's military and Syrian government forces for not taking the measures to protect children. Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party has named Jeffrey Donaldson as its new leader. He is the third person in a matter of weeks to lead the region's largest party during crucial post-Brexit talks. Donaldson has pledged to pressure the British government to ditch post-Brexit trade rules that treat Northern Ireland as part of the EU for customs purposes. His unopposed candidacy will be formally ratified by party officials next week. Lawmakers in the pro-British party ousted then leader Arlene Foster in late April in favour of Edwin Poots, who stepped down last week. The European Union has launched a wide-ranging antitrust probe against Google over concerns that it is forcing out rivals in the online advertising market. In a statement, the EU competition chief said the probe will assess whether Google has violated EU competition rules. Margaret Vestager said the bloc is concerned that Google has made it harder for rival online advertising services to compete. The EU is at odds over Google's highly dominant technologies that serve as an intermediary between advertisers and publishers online. The probe narrows in on an important slice of Google's business model, where over $147 billion of its revenue last year came from advertising. The probe will also look into Google's announced plans to prohibit the placement of third-party cookies on its Chrome browser. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has ordered a probe into gun violence that killed 19 people in Reynosa City over the weekend. Armed gunmen fired from cars during multiple attacks in several neighborhoods of Reynosa on Saturday. 15 among those killed were civilians, while 4 others are believed to be from a criminal group. Speaking at a news conference, Obrador said he would direct the Attorney General's office to investigate the matter.
Everything indicates that this was not a confrontation, but a command to shoot at people who were not attacking anyone. This was a cowardly act that took away the lives of innocent people.
Reynosa, which borders Texas, is one of Mexico's most violent cities and is a battleground for powerful drug gangs fighting for control. And now moving on, millions of residents in Mexico City have taken part in an emergency earthquake drill. It is an annual event that aims to prepare residents to respond appropriately in the wake of an earthquake. The drill began as the authorities activated quake alarms across the city. Following that, residents and office workers carried out emergency evacuations of homes and buildings. The drill brought back traumatic memories for many residents from deadly quakes that have rocked the capital over years. The city's last massive quake in 2017 killed hundreds and left tens of thousands of buildings damaged. German company VOLOCOPTER has performed the first flight of its electric air taxi Velocity at a show in Le Bourget airport near Paris. The company aims to have the service operational for the Olympic Games in France in 2024. More in this report.
The flying taxi, which looks like a tiny helicopter, took off and landed vertically over the Bourget airport with no passenger on board during a 3-minute flight. It flew a 500-meter route with speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour and about 30 meters above the ground.
We do not sell Volocities to individual persons. In the city of the future, these will be shared assets that are professionally operated as a fleet. So you as a customer can then call a Volocity to come and pick you up when you need it, and you only pay for the flight. And as I said, with increasing volumes, we can offer these flights at the cost of a taxi today.
Velocity has a luggage compartment with a capacity of 2 people on board. The company's chief executive, Florian Reuter, says the flying taxi service would initially operate with a pilot, but it would be fully automated over a period of time.
With respect to regulation, initially we will have a fully certified, fully licensed helicopter pilot, just to fit into existing regulation.
Florian Reuter said that the urban mobility is more than a $10 trillion market and is one of the biggest market potentials out there. He said that by 2035, his company can serve a market that has around $300 billion in opportunity just with their air taxis.
So time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And other business updates. The U.S. stocks have opened subdued as investors awaited Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's remarks on how the central bank is balancing inflation risk. Bitcoin broke below $30,000 to trade at its lowest level in more than 5 months as losses accelerated with intensified crackdown efforts by China. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite traded nearly 0.1% higher at open. The Dow Jones Index also opened mostly unchanged. The S&P 500 also landed in the green territory, trading close to 0.25% higher at open. Meanwhile, oil prices rose slightly as sentiments remained solid on hopes for a quick recovery in oil demand in the US and the European markets. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.